Okay, welcome everyone tonight to our third class in Lekutei Halachot, Hilchot Hashkamat HaBoker, on Chanukah. It's section, it's Halacha 4, Ois Yud, and in the handouts it's paragraph 8. Okay, so we're going to backtrack one little paragraph just to kind of make a link between what we said yesterday and what we're going to be discussing today. In my particular version of Lekutei Halachot, which is this new version that has annotations and commentary, it's page Kuf Yud Gimel, or 113. It's in the first volume of the series. Okay. Avol b'Chanukah hadlakahu b'derech nes nifla. However, at Chanukah, unlike the other holidays, like the holidays and Shabbos, the hadlaka, the lighting, is through a tremendous miracle. Ki oz ein lo aliyah kol kach, because there is at that time not such an elevation. Ki heim yemei achol, because after all, Chanukah mostly happens during the weekdays, the regular weekdays. Kioz ein misbatlim haklipa shehem arba malchus legamre, because then the spiritual barriers that come from the influence of the four kingdoms that have exiled us, their spiritual influence, they don't, what's it called? They're not totally nullified, like Shabbos Yom Tov, like on Shabbos and on the holidays. Yafal pikein onu madlikin ner hakodesh hazeh shekolo kol haYehudim, and still we light this very holy light that includes all the unifications of divine names that bring down divine light into the world, especially the three special unifications of divine names that are unique to lighting the Chanukah candles. And like I mentioned last class, a unification of the divine name means you take two holy names of God that are appropriate for the particular ritual, and you intertwine them one letter after another. So let's say you have four letters here from the names. You intertwine them like that, and you visualize you visualize in your mind. There are different ways you could visualize it. Most standard is you visualize like it's on a Sefer Torah. Black fire upon white fire, and through that unification, you draw down light from you cause different spiritual forces in the higher realms of holiness to unite, and that draws down a spiritual light, spiritual energy through the realms of holiness to reach down into this world, making this world a more God-conscious place, making this world a more blessed place, making this world a more physically and spiritually abundant place. V'afal pi chein madlikim, okay, v'shehu bechinas hamshachas hasogas elokus ayidei atzimsumim, and this is this relates to drawing down divine perception through the constrictions, by the tzimtzumim. Remember, we discussed what tzimtzumim are. They're bringing the light down to they're the means to bring light down from higher levels to lower levels, from upstream in the higher worlds to downstream through the lower worlds down, finally into our world. We're at the very end of the chain of basically innumerable levels of worlds. I mean, there are 5 basic worlds, but even those worlds are subdivided into worlds. And we're kind of like, we're the bottom feeder of the whole system. Hence we're physical. So So what we do is, through Torah and mitzvahs, we manifest blessing in the world. And he's describing here how the lights of Chanukah, work in this capacity to manifest blessing in the world, manifest the world becomes closer to God as a result, it becomes more filled with divine light and blessing. V'hainu b'chinas hanal, shatzadikim gedolim ma'od mamshichim tikunim nifloim ke'ela. This is like what we mentioned before, that the great tzaddikim, the great saintly people, drew down to us tremendous remedies in order in order that we can bring down the spiritual light into this world, make the lower world here into as a reflection of paradise above. Ad sheme'irim b'chinas hasogas elokus ha'yidei hatzimtzumim gam lemata b'yuta tachtonim od, until there's a perception of divinity through coming down through the constrictions, through the filters, down to this lowest of levels. Shehu b'chinas lemata ma'asor tvachim, which is lower than 10 handbreadths. Remember, we mentioned the 10 handbreadths is about 40 inches, and it symbolizes, coming really down low, down into this world. And it has significance, particularly with Chanukah, because ideally, if one could help it, one is supposed to lay the menorah, set the menorah below 10 handbreadths, below 40 inches, if one could help it. If one can't, then, you still do the mitzvah, but the ideal way is that it should be below 10 handbreadths. Because the Shekhinah, until the time of Chanukah, never descended this low. Va'ata al yidei toikev hanes madlikim sham daika haner Chanukah hakodesh v'hanoyren. Now, through the power of the miracle, we specifically light this holy lamp, this holy light of Chanukah, this holy candle of Chanukah, which is holy and awesome. Shehu b'chinas hamshachas hasogas elukus ayidei hatzimtzum, which is bringing down filtered down through the levels, divinity, perception of divinity, lamata mata, bringing down this perception of divinity lower and lower, laha'ir b'chol echad miYisrael, to illuminate each and every Jew, l'chol mi sheroitz l'kabel, any Jew who wants to receive this light, afilu imhu hageruim shebigeruim, even if he's the lowly of lowest, lowly of lowly, afilu hachoila hagodol b'yosef b'chol yeh hanefesh ayidei v'inoisav, even someone who's so spiritually sick as a result of his sins, even such a person could receive the divine perception that comes through the light of Chanukah. That even such a person that's so lowly can receive divine perception. Through the great power of the tzaddikim, that drew down the power of the light, the miracle of Chanukah into the world. So we're reenacting the miracle, we're feeling the miracle again. That is even to the point that a mundane weekday, which we're now able to elevate ourselves and to elevate the lower wisdom of the Shekhinah, to get her out of the you might say, the environment of the of the negative spiritual forces. Still we draw down the light of divine perception through the filters lamata below, afilu b'madrega tachtoina, even into the lower levels. You can appreciate from this why the Lubavitcher Rebbe has been pushing for people to light Hanukkah menorahs publicly in the streets, in the malls, at the White House, at the seats of power of all the nations. He's been pushing for this in order to bring down this light. Now, you might say initially, oy vey, the light has to come down so low. That's like taking the king and bringing him into a cesspool. I mean, why do you want to bring this precious holy light so low down into a world that's full of, from a spiritual perspective at least, utter filth? If you think about it. And the truth be told is it's the other way around. God, when he created the world, wanted a dwelling place for his light, specifically down in this world. There's a midrash which says, Nis'ava kodesh baruch hu lasos lo yidira b'tachtonim. The Holy One wanted a dwelling place below. And what it means, a dwelling place below, there might be other interpretations, but this is my understanding based on what I've read, mainly means that God's light is below in this world, that the world is filled with his light, that this world becomes a paradise, and that all the creatures in this world are conscious of their creator, that everything in the world is conscious of God. Not just because there's an intellectual idea in our heads, but more like we perceive that he's in the world. Sort of the way we see things, sort of the way we hear things. It's part of our perception. As it says about the days of Mashiach, that all flesh will perceive that the mouth of God has spoken. The flesh will perceive. The Lubavitcher Rebbe points out, means the flesh will perceive that God has spoken. So we're really talking about a radical change in our very existence. We're kind of like only half existing compared to the way we're going to exist at that time. And so one could say, oy vey, the light has to come down this low. But on the other hand, it's a huge celebration. If you notice, no one's upset about it. We're all happy about it, because that's really the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that the world is permeated with God's light.
True.
Yeah. So, and we don't understand God's mysteries, but he wanted a lowly world. He wanted a lowly world to put his holy temple, to have a Jewish people who observe the Torah. He wanted all this to happen in a lowly world. He could have given the Torah to the souls. He could have given the Torah to the angels. He gave it to human beings made of flesh and blood, who are, who live here temporarily, who are, prone to sin, who are prone to selfishness, who are prone to baser desires. And yet, it's to us that he gave his holy Torah. It's us he wanted. We don't understand it. It doesn't necessarily make sense. I mean, the angels are living a much more beautiful life than we are, a much more ethereal and spiritual life than we are. Souls, before they come into a body, are also living that way. But yet he wants us. He wants our lowly realm. And this underscores the value of a mitzvah, It can only be done in this world. To do this act that God considers so precious can only happen in this world. It can't happen in the upper worlds. Only a being in a body with free choice can do a mitzvah. A being that's disembodied doesn't have free choice anymore. It's the polar opposites between a soul and a body that gives us free choice. It's like we're pulled this way, we're pulled that way. Once we're ethereal, once we're a soul, there's no more free choice. The truth is known. It's not like we're tempted anymore. It's not like we have baser desires anymore. So the light of Chanukah coming all the way down like this, that's the goal. That's the goal of reality. Ki migoydol koicham yochol leheir afil madrega hatachtoina, because of the tremendous power. The lights of Chanukah come down even to the lowest of levels. Ki migoy meod l'rapos afilu hacholim hagedolim b'yoseh, to heal even the more greatly sick, meaning spiritually sick. Shezehu bechinas hadlokas ner Chanukah lemata ma'asar tefachim. That's the light of Chanukah below the 10 handbreadths. V'zeh bechinas gam ki elech begeit salmoves loy ira ra ki ata imadi. And that's what we say in Psalm 23. I'm sure many of you've read it in English. I mean, it's often quoted, even in general society. And though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Sounds familiar?
Oh, yes.
Okay, but now Rabbi Nosson of Nemirov is saying that's what this verse is talking about. Bechinas, that even in this dark place, the light of Chanukah, the Chanukah lights that you send down are with me. Bechinas ki eshe b'choshech Hashem oirli. And another verse from the book of Micah, or Micha in Hebrew, as I sit in darkness, God is a light to me. God is my light. Shemamshichim ha'or shel hasogas elokus lemata b'oimek hachoshech, that we draw down this light of the perception of divinity into the depth of darkness, b'vchinas gates almoves, into the valley of the shadow of death. Leheir lanemuchim ma'od ma'od, that to illuminate the lowest levels, the darkest nights. We're in the darkest nights of the year, the longest nights of the year right now. Sheyagia gam aleim ha'orav yedia melokusa yisparach shemoy, that even to those who are those people who are night dwellers, they're lowly of low. They themselves are the personification of the valley of the shadow of death and darkness. The perception of divinity and knowledge of divinity reaches them. Kidei l'rapoisam, in order to heal them, u'lesaknam, and to fix them, u'laishiva me'elav, and to return them to God, to return their focus to God, and return their involvement to God, to help them do tshuva, to bring them back close to God. So, interesting. L'rafoisam l'saknam. Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, remember the famous singer of Shlomo Carlebach? He once asked, what's the difference between healing and fixing? So he said, healing is a slow process. Fixing is an immediate process.
Oh, okay.
Makes
sense.
Yeah, you bring a car to a mechanic, he fixes it, it's immediately fixed. Doesn't have to go through a healing process.
Mm-hmm.
So so there are both levels going on over here. People who are spiritually sick, who are looking for God's, and God is touching them and trying to touch them and trying to reach them through the lights of Chanukah, and through other means as well. They are, there are two kinds of improvements that are going on in their souls. There's one that's slower and more developing, and there's one that's more immediate. So that's why Reb Nosson writes, "L'rapoisam," to heal them, "l'saknam," to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not synonyms, two different processes. So now we begin a new, new part in this Torah, and this part deals with the argument between Shammai and Hillel. I don't know how much time we'll get to devote to this, but we'll try. If we not, we'll continue tomorrow night. So, what happened? I don't know if you're aware of it, but the Talmud discusses a dispute between Shammai and Hillel, one of their many disputes. It's actually not between Shammai and Hillel as much as between their academies. It could be that the dispute happened posthumously, after Shammai passed on, after Hillel passed on. That's what, and the question was, do we light candles? How do we light the 8 candles of Chanukah? So you and I, we know that you light the first night 1, the second night 2, the third night 3, the fourth night 4, and so on until the 8th night we light 8, right? Everyone's familiar with that?
Plus the shamas.
Plus the shamas, right. The Academy of Shammai held just the opposite. You might have not heard of it, but they held, because we don't practice this way, but we practice like the Academy of Hillel in this matter. We do actually practice like the Academy of Hillel in most matters. But the Academy of Shammai held the first night you light 8, the second night 7, the third night 6, the fourth night 5, the fifth night 4, and so on till the 8th night you're lighting 1. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Just the opposite. So now Rav Nosson of Nemirov is going to go into the mysticism behind their two approaches. Why is it that one approach says we add light every night, and the other approach says we take away light every night? What is going on? And just to give you a little background, there were, which you could see from the famous story of the convert who wanted to study the Torah while standing on one foot. Remember that story? If you don't, I'll tell it. The Talmud in Tractate Shabbos brings that there was a convert who was looking to convert to Judaism, but on one condition, that he's taught the whole Torah while he stands on one foot.
Wow.
Now, that sounds pretty preposterous, right?
It does, definitely. Yep. Undoable.
Right. So he came to Shammai. That was the first one he came to. And now remember, Shammai was the second in command in the Sanhedrin. Hillel was the Nasi, and Shammai, the prince, and Shammai was the second greatest rabbi in the Sanhedrin of the time. Was second rank. And Shammai heard this, he got upset, and he took out a builder's measuring rod, what we'd think of today as a ruler, and he chased the guy out. Like, what kind of chutzpah is this? What kind of audacity is this? The same man came to Hillel and said, please teach me the Torah while I stand on one foot, and if you do, I will convert to Judaism. So Hillel responded to him and said, that which is hateful to you, do not do unto others. And the rest is commentary.
Okay.
In other words, he told him, in the negative sense, he told him, love your neighbor as yourself. Ahavta reacha kamocha. And he said the rest is a commentary on that concept. The whole Torah is seminally in that concept. Everything is a commentary from there. And the man converted. He happily converted. So what do we learn from, what does this story illustrate? And there are lots of stories sort of like this, and lots of examples sort of like this, in differences in halachic rulings between the house, we call it the house, but I mean the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel. Shammai had a tougher, more idealistic personality and approach. He was bechinas midas hadin. He was this aspect of strictness, discipline, and an ideal. Like, okay, so it's a little harder to get to the ideal. So what? Hillel's approach was more lenient, more kind, more practical, and felt that the road to the ideal could be a long road. We'll get closer to the ideal by being softer than we will by being more disciplined. So we say that Hillel's bechinas midas hachesed. He's the side of kindness. In the tree of the spheros, on the right, 10 spheros on the right side, you have the column of chesed, which is the side of kindness. On the left side, you have the column of gevura, which is the side of discipline. So they say that Hillel's soul was rooted in the sphera of chesed, the sphera of kindness, and Shammai's soul was rooted in the sphera of gevura and the sphera of discipline, and it affected how they processed. They both had the same teachers, but affected how they processed the lessons from their teachers. So with that in mind, let's now begin. V'zeh bechinas pelukta shebein beis Shammai u'beis Hillel, and this relates to the dispute between the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel. Shebeis Shammai oimrim poiches v'hoylech. The Academy of Shammai said, when it comes to lighting the Chanukah candles, we diminish as we progress. U'beis Hillel oimrim moisef v'hoylech. And the Academy of Hillel said, no, the opposite. We add as we progress. Ki Beis Shammai l'tamei. Beis Shammai had their reasons. Ki amru Rabboseinu Zal, for our holy sages commented about Shammai, his personality. Shammai haya kapton. Shammai was a, what's it called? How would you say kapton or not?
Strict.
It was strict. And therefore he would chase away the converts from converting. And he pushed them away with the builder's measuring rod, a ruler. But Hillel, through his tremendous humility, brought them close with compassion. Even though the truth be told that those who were brought close by Hillel weren't all really worthy of being brought close, but Hillel still brought them close. And they told Hillel, what I told you was only one of 5 stories of people who told Hillel and Shammai strange conditions for for wanting to convert. Strange. One of them said, "I'll only convert if I'm made Kohen Gadol." They all had, 5 of them came with strange reasons. They were meshugana reasons, crazy conditions. Like, for example, I just mentioned Lamdam Kol HaTorah Kishaim Demal Regel Achas, to learn the whole Torah while standing on one foot. And still, Hillel did not push them away. He brought them close with his wisdom and his humility, his tremendous humility. Therefore, the Academy of Shammai, the students of Shammai, the Academy of Shammai, because of their tremendous saintliness and holiness, had no patience for such people who were so distant and dirtied up from sins of youth. You know what sins of youth are?
No.
It's a euphemism for sexual perversion.
Okay.
V'kayotze b'hem was similar to them. V'alkein amru poiches v'hoylech. Therefore he said, let's hide the light from them. Let's make the light less and less every night. That was Shammai's attitude. Like, we don't want these people in our camp. We don't want them close. They're not worthy of being close. They're not worthy of the beauty of the Torah. So let's hide the light from them. We'll make it less every night. And if you think that there was there wasn't something to be said for that, there definitely was. And I could talk to that in a few minutes, but I want to first do the next paragraph before I talk to that.
Okay.
Ki beis Shammai uveis Hillel shneim moedim shetzarichim lahoisiv laharbos oyer b'chol yom sheba acharav. Truthfully, both the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel both agreed that you have to increase the light each day, as Chanukah progresses. Ki bevadai neis shel yimei Chanukah shedolak haner shelo haya boy lahadlik ki im yom echad v'dolak shmina yom bevadai kol yom sheba achrav hanes godol v'flav yoser, because each and every day the miracle was greater and greater. You start off with a little bottle of oil that was enough for one day, and each day that it lasted was even a bigger miracle than the day before. And so obviously it takes a greater light to make a greater miracle. So obviously each day was a greater miracle than the day before it. So what is going on over here? Why is Shammai suddenly saying, let's make the light less as opposed to making it more? Ach beShammai soivrim shemechama zeh ba'atzmo mechamas godol ha'or shenimshach b'chol yom b'yoser. They're saying because of this itself, because of the great light that's being drawn each day more and more, therefore we have to hide it. The more the more light there is, the more there's what to hide. We have to hide it. Because the wicked and those distant from God, they aren't worthy of making use of that light. And I want to share with you. This is what I want to share with you. It's not merely the view that they're not worthy of making use of it. The view is that it's destructive for them to make use of it. It's like giving a machine gun into the hands of a 5-year-old. If you really understand what the hidden light is, if you really, really understand it, then you realize that one who grasps onto it and is unworthy can wreak tremendous destruction in the world. They're not worthy of it, meaning that they can hurt themselves and hurt others with it. They don't have the maturity, they don't have the vessels to handle it. And with this, I'll share with you a story that represents this side of this point of view. A story that happened to me. You know, my father's Rabbi, Rav Simcha Wasserman, wasn't such a simple, wasn't just a regular rabbi. I mean, this was a person who was deeply immersed in Torah. When I say deeply immersed in Torah, anywhere in the Talmud he knew by heart. He asked my father, "What are you learning today in Talmud?" "Oh, this and that page." And he would learn it on the phone with my father like he himself just learned it. He knew the Talmud by heart. I don't know how to describe the great Torah scholars and great Torah saints of that generation. But, you know, he knew things. Let's leave it at that. I once asked him, what's the problem with younger people learning Kabbalah? You know what he answered me? He told me, do you know how the atom bomb came to be? You see, when God created the light, he said, "Let there be light." And then God hid most of that light because he realized that it was very powerful and too destructive and too tempting for the wicked who will use it for towards destructive ends. So what did God do? He hid that light in the Torah. And you have to learn a lot of Torah in order to access that light. Now, so what happened? In the time of World War II, because things were a little crazy, a little tiny drop of that light was released into the world. And with that little light that was released into the world, the scientists were able to come up with the idea of the atom bomb. And he said, and he emphasized that was just a little bit, a tiny drop of that light that allowed for that. He says, now you understand why it's not recommended for just anyone to learn this material? So it's a tremendous knowledge like this takes a tremendous responsibility. The reason I'm telling you this story is not because I'm on the camp of Shammai. No, I'm not. I'm in the camp of Hillel. But I share you this story because I want the thinking and the reasoning of that point of view to be real to you as we're learning it. It's a rare treat to understand this point of view. So,
Mhm.
so you know, so now let's get back into the text. Um, and it's like what our sages said. That God saw that the world was not worthy of making use of the light of the 7 days of creation. And he hid it for the tzaddikim in the future. He hid it in the Torah so that the tzaddikim in the future can make use of it. Well, responsibly, obviously. Only they who have been morally refined could be trusted to use it responsibly. Valkain heim soivrim shegam ata shatzadikim masigim or gadol tzrichim lahalim or. So they wanted to be like their creator. That's how the Academy of Shammai said. Let's be like the creator. The creator hid the light so that the unworthy cannot get their hands on it. So and destroy, possibly destroy the world through it. So we should do the same. And the more that the tzaddikim understand of this hidden light, more and more, we have to hide this light more and more, so that the wicked and those distant from God do not have any pleasure from it. And that's the idea of lighting less and less candles, to keep the light closer and closer in with the holy ones, and not to let it out into the world. And now we're going to get to the point of view which at least I'm in the camp with, I believe in. Aval Beis Hillel, but Beis Hillel Shehem Talmidei Hillel, that meaning the students of Hillel. Shahaya Isaac Likarev Rechoikim, they were involved in bringing back those who were distant from God. Al Kain Ozle L'Tamayhu. Therefore, they went according to their reasoning to say, no, we have to add the light. Ki adarabba, just the opposite from what Shammai thinks, the other way around. Kol ma shatzadikim amshichim or gadol noisef v'yoseh. The more the tzadikim bring more and more of the light, the more the tzaddik knows of the divine light, the more he has to illuminate the world more and more. He has to illuminate every single human being. To bring those who are distant from God closer and closer. To illuminate those who are small, those who are very lowly, to heal even the people who are more spiritually sick, the people who are greatly spiritually sick, Rahman Aslan Nebuch, to heal those who are lowly, those who are spiritually sick. The tzaddik has to bring, the more he knows, the more he has what to give to heal the world. He only wants to give to heal the world. So you may say, well, what do we then do about the concern I mentioned earlier? So that's why it's not enough that the tzaddik just gives forth the light. He has to process it in a way that reaches the lowly people and inspires them towards God. but at the same time does what is it called? Doesn't doesn't how I put it to you. If it's unprocessed, that's when they can use it for destructive purposes. But if it's processed properly, they won't use it for destructive purposes.
Mm-hmm.
He has to filter it. He has to do the tzimtzumim, tell parables. I'll give you an example. Sunlight, when it comes to the world, right?
Right.
There's such a thing called the ozone layer. What is the ozone layer? The ozone layer is a tzimtzum. You ever wanted a tzimtzum that you could actually point to? It's the ozone layer.
And tzimtzum is contraction,
right? It filters the light. It keeps out certain destructive elements of the light from the world. So the only thing that filters through is the useful part of the light.
Mm. Okay.
So if the hidden light came to the wicked without a filter, then the concern that I heard about, from Simcha Wasserman, the concern that the Academy of Shammai has is a true concern. But if it comes down with the proper filter, then it's beneficial. You hear?
Uh-huh.
So the tzaddik, when he wants to, tzaddik that's from the Academy of Hillel, he wants to give and wants to feed the light to all those in the world who need direction, guidance, help, the broken souls, the souls who are lost. He wants to help them all. But he also understands that he has to filter it down for them. Tzimtzumim are like filters. He has to filter it down for them so that they could take it properly. Ki kemoi shekol ma shachayla gadol b'yoseh tzarich levakish latzmo Rabbi gadol b'yoseh kanal. As we mentioned earlier, the more spiritually sick someone is, the greater a tzaddik he needs, the greater of a rabbi he needs. Kemoichen harabi v'tzaddik kol ma magia l'mayla gedola yisera b'yoseh utzarich lahoyer b'ketana v'hanamuchim b'yoser. And the converse is true for the tzaddik. Just like someone who's more spiritually sick needs a greater tzaddik, the more that tzaddik grows spiritually, because he comes in contact with the higher spiritual light, the more he has to seek even lowlier people to elevate. It's a two-way street. Just as the lowly needs the bigger tzaddik, the bigger a tzaddik becomes because he has more contact with the hidden light, the more he has to seek lower people to elevate. It actually speaks to his elevated status and his greatness, that he brings those who are further away. And this is actually the main greatness of God and His glory, as mentioned elsewhere. So the bigger the tzaddik, the more he has to reach out to the lowly. That's his job. If God gave you such ability and you don't use it, shame on you. You've been given the ability to heal so many people, to bring light to the lowly and broken. You got to use it. Yeah, of course, you have to give it a filter so that they can't use it for destructive ends. And you have to be careful how you say things and how you present things, but you got to use it. You have to reach out to them. So, and this is the approach of Hillel. So therefore, we add light to the Chanukah Neiros, to the Chanukah candles, because the more light there is, the more light we shine. That's our approach. So anyways, we're going to pause over here for tonight. And God willing, tomorrow night we'll pick up to continue this discussion of Hillel. And you're going to see, God willing, tomorrow night, some passages we've learned in the last few weeks in Tanakh, which, you'll see over here how I got some of what I said to explain those passages. He's going to go on to talk about Eliyahu Hanavi and Elisha, and he's going to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, how he pleaded for the people. And he's going to essentially say that even when God is complaining to the prophet about the Jews, God doesn't want the prophet to commiserate together with him about the Jews. He wants the prophet to get up and to protect the Jews, to speak in defense of the Jewish people. He wants them to shine the light. So that's what we're going to be discussing as well. Just a little preview of what's coming up. Okay, so thank you for joining.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good night, everyone.
Chag Sameach, and God willing, the fun will continue tomorrow night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And vice versa.
Okay, thanks. Okay, take care. Good night. Chag
Night,
Sameach.
night.